controls what you say on social media? Interesting conversation.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
I think social media is nuts right now, but it's a platform that people readily accept, and who says what about what you can say on it is an interesting concept. Steve Brown from the ACLU is challenging the town of East Greenwich in a new policy they have for what employees can say on social media. We'll get to the nuances of that and have a good conversation about it coming up momentarily. It's great to have you in. Thanks very much for joining us on this Thursday evening. I don't know if we get a general sense out here in America that in Washington we may have another Saturday Night Massacre happening, and it's like happening right in front of us, and I just don't think that we're really grasping it. And I've got to do some historical work and bring some people in here in the very near future, in the next few days and nights, to talk both on the radio and on the television about what it was like during Watergate as it was percolating, and whether or not it had the resonance that it did at the end. I was too young. I was an adolescent when all of that was going on. So we have to check on that. But take a look at this headline. It is very unusual that, in fact, unprecedented, that the FBI would be in a public dispute with the President of the United States about the release of a memo from House Intelligence and Representative Nunes, who seems to be running his own race with the blessing of the Speaker of the House. This 4-page memo that we're now all having pregame shows on, which describes some of the surveillance work in the FISA application for the Russian investigation. It is clear that the President of the United States is charged up to release it because he was asked by a member of Congress out the door at the State of the Union the other night whether he wanted to.
Release the memo. Oh, yeah. Don't worry. 100%.
100%. He wants it out. Now the White House is suggesting that it'll be redacted. Now, we do the show early in the afternoon. Something may have happened this afternoon between recording and you seeing this program regarding this memo, because there's a short timeline, only 5 days under House rules for the President to approve the release of the memo after they send it to the White House. So it's incredible. And you've got intel officers. Now you could say, well, the FBI is just trying to cover itself. Well, they're talking about more damage than that. We'll see. We'll see. This Russian investigation thing has many tentacles. It may have nothing underneath it, but it's got a lot of tentacles. All right. Here at home, the Speaker of the House has kind of weighed in again, and now he's suggesting that there's a substantial more money that the PawSox ought to be putting in into this stadium project, which has been, of course, a back and forth in Rhode Island and on Smith Hill. But he's not specific about what he wants. He just wants more. It's like that commercial. Remember, I want more and more. The little kid, I want more and more and more from the PawSox, but he's not saying what. He wants more meetings from the PawSox in the towns. He wants more and more, but he doesn't say what he wants. Is Steve Frias, his former opponent, to get the heck out of the race, and then he wouldn't care so much about more and more and more, because he thinks the people in Cranston are going to turn him away from the polls in November because of this issue, which they won't. They never do. Anyway, we'll see what the more and more is, and whether the PawSox have had it up to here with more and more, and whether they go for something else in Worcester. All right, East Greenwich. Headline. The ACLU having a little bit of a conversation with the town there, and I just think this is a fascinating conversation, so we asked Steve Brown to come to us. We talked about it on the radio a little bit. Welcome, sir. Great to have you.
Good to be here.
By the way, you watch government, and I didn't bring you here for this, and if you want to take a pass, fine, but spontaneously, have you been watching this Washington thing and what's going on with
it's wild.
What do you think?
I don't know what to
no
make
formal
of it.
ACLU position, of course,
No.
but just you as a person, do you get the sense that there's something serious in terms of constitutional crisis bubbling up here?
Absolutely. To see the FBI at odds with the president, all this back and forth publicly is troubling, and the president's seeming attempts to really stifle the investigation should be of concern to everybody. I think the echoes of Watergate are there.
I'm not going to ask you your age. It's not a proper thing to do. But were you around enough to know? I really got to get to some historians because I don't. 74 is when it was really, right? 74-ish was when, you know what, hit the fan,
Yeah,
yes-ish. I was 13. So, I was playing ball, My parents were watching it. Of course, I did record Nixon's resignation speech, and we're getting way ahead of ourselves here. But I don't remember whether it was kind of a slow burn or whether everyone was really paying attention to it, because I don't think the public really has figured out what's really going on here. The news media is starting to get all about it, but I don't know.
Yeah, I was in my teens then too, but one thing I do recall is you had these Watergate hearings, and certainly the hearings were really well viewed. I do remember that. I do remember people being glued to the TV.
When we got to the hearing space, that's when everybody was focused on it. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll put that on the to-do list, Lexi. East Greenwich, and you were having a conversation. Where are you formally? Because sometimes you just write letters, sometimes you levy lawsuits, sometimes you just do press conferences. Where are you in terms of your transactional conversation with the town of East Greenwich right now?
At this point, we sent them a letter a few days ago raising concerns about this new social media policy that they adopted last week. According to news reports, they've sent a letter back to me. I've not gotten it yet, but it's been referred to in some of the media
reports. They send it on a horse and buggy?
I don't know how they sent it.
They get these email things these days. They go really fast.
It may have been blocked by their social media policy. I don't know. So I'm not exactly. The response is that we're just all wet. That our letter is. They think it really isn't applicable. I look forward to seeing the letter, but we do have very serious First Amendment concerns about this policy. At its essence, what it does is there are always limits on what you can do as a government employee. You can't just speak about whatever you want to as a government employee. They can set up, a hierarchy who gets to speak for them, which is fine.
On the issues of government.
Right. What this policy does, certainly as we read it, and I encourage everybody else to read it, what it says is essentially what you can say as a town employee is what you can say as a private employee on social media, that you're held to the same standard. And that's simply not what the Constitution provides. Just because you're a government employee, it does not mean that you give up your First Amendment rights 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on anything you want to talk about. You still retain First Amendment rights as a private citizen.
Let's go backwards before we go forwards. Is this a result of what has been a pretty contentious environment in that town regarding open meetings, the process by which they hire the town manager, Republicans mostly on that board challenged by a single Democrat, but a real throng of the population which has been showing up at meetings arguing that the very transactional process of her hire wasn't opaque enough, wasn't clear enough rather. Did you weigh in on that issue?
Not direct. We did weigh in on some of the open meetings issues that arose during that whole mess.
They got whacked by the judge.
They did. They got whacked very hard by the judge. The judge found that the town had engaged in a number of knowing and willful violations of the open meetings law, that the hiring and some firing process that occurred with some employees was illegal. It was a very strongly worded opinion saying, there's a lot wrong going on here. And rather than try to, correct those problems, I see something like this social media policy as only furthering the problem.
Well, do you think it spawns from, and we'll be happy to talk to the people of East Greenwich about this, but I wanted to lay the foundation of the complaint by Steve tonight. Is it a question of certain employees speaking about town politics and policy on what they consider to be their own time or own platform in social media that have caused some distress amongst the government players there, and so they construct a new policy to try to tap that down?
Well, I mean, that's a fair guess. I don't have any direct knowledge one way or another, but in light of all the controversy going on in the town, it wouldn't surprise me if this is just another effort to try to control things, control what people can say, control the message. But again, as I said, I don't have any direct knowledge of what prompted it.
All right, when we come back, we'll talk about the fine line, because there are some fine lines, and there are all sorts of nuances in this new age of social media. Stay with us. So the East Greenwich Patch website right there, they're also kind of immersed in some challenges with East Greenwich because, I don't know, I've read a lot of stuff going on, reported about East Greenwich in the Patch, and they seem to be very diligent and really understand what's going on in their community, but biases occur and a flame is thrown in both directions. And so there's a whole bit of political turbulence. I mean, just in general, Steve, that they've been getting after each other down there in what should be a very quiet, upscale Rhode Island town that just goes about its business.
I think it was very quiet for a very long period of time, but it has really blown up in the last 6 months or so.
So let's talk about the social media thing. If you just tuned in, the social media policy that East Greenwich has put out is a point of contention for the ACLU. If you work for a private company, there are certain restrictions that a private company will try to put on you in terms of your communication representation. In general, social media or not, what can a private company do legally?
A private company can do virtually anything. There are limits if there's a union or people trying to organize a union. There's some rules governing what companies can do to try to stifle that. They're limited there. But otherwise, private companies are not subject to the Constitution. They don't have to abide by the First Amendment. The only rights that employees have in terms of their speech is what is in any state laws or company policies that protect them.
So if Sally is texting or social media platform, Facebook, or on Twitter, Instagram, whatever, just carrying on about, I don't know, a neighborhood issue, and it's getting hot in the kitchen, a private company can view that and say, hey, listen, your behavior is starting to impact our reputation and act on it, correct?
Yes.
With complete
Pretty
protection.
much. I mean, I wouldn't put it past, a good attorney to try to come up with some arguments, but generally, yes.
Right. Of course, if the company acts too aggressively, it takes its own risk in terms of the lashback, the pushback, that kind of thing. When it comes to a town government or a quasi-agency, something that is somewhat or fully funded by the taxpayers, the rules are stricter or not stricter?
So when you're talking about town government or state government, the First Amendment applies. So there are certain free speech rights that individuals have that you don't have in the private sector. Now, those First Amendment rights are somewhat limited. A town can say only this person has the right to speak on behalf of the town. You don't have the right to do that. That's appropriate. And the town can, to some extent, limit what you do privately if it directly interferes and obstructs, town management.
But it seems to me that the argument to say that the town feels like it's being interfered with would be, say Joe Smith, made up name, is a department director for the town of East Greenwich, and he decides to put out false information or analysis of a new ordinance, and it is not in sync with the intent and or the meaning or of the ordinance, they can sanction him for that. But if he says, hey, I don't like this new law, or he's now acting as a citizen, especially on Twitter, when you say tweets are my own, but does not represent, blah, blah, blah. They've got less grasp, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, take an example. You have, let's say, somebody who works in the Parks Department who has children attending the school in the district.
Okay.
And they want to go to a school committee meeting and speak out on an important issue relating to the town and the school. The town can't say, because you work for us in the Parks Department, you can't say anything about the town. You can't go to a school committee meeting in the town and talk about an issue that's of public concern.
Gotcha.
They still have the First Amendment right to speak out on issues of public concern like that. They can't be stifled simply because they also happen to work for some other area.
And do you think this ordinance, which I believe is written more for department heads and the like, is it written for everybody in the town? I thought it was for department heads.
No, this applies, as far as I know, this applies to all town employees. And as I said earlier, it really, I can dig out the language for you. What it says is, this applies to what you say as much on town time as on private time. And
no matter what the platform.
No, right, a social media platform.
Well, it's interesting because they're not saying you can't go to a town meeting and say, hey, listen, I don't like the school bus delivery for my 4-year-old, even though you work in something else in the town, you're in the tax assessor's office.
Right, but if you tweet about it.
But if you tweet about it, because it's the written word, and all of a sudden it takes on its own life. You see you see no distinction between the First Amendment right?
No, not at all. Again, the issue, what the courts have generally said is government employees retain First Amendment rights outside of their employment if they want to speak out on matters of public concern. And unless the town can demonstrate there's some really direct interference, impact, obstruction on the town based on what they're saying, so it doesn't mean the person can privately say my boss is blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
But to give the example of going to a school committee meeting, they have the right to do that.
How many other communities in Rhode Island have created this kind of a policy?
I'm not aware of any that have created a policy like this. I'm sure that the general issue of social media is something that communities are dealing with, but to have a policy like this one that covers employees 24/7. I haven't seen anything like that before, whether it's out there, perhaps, but this is the first one I've seen.
It's really interesting, the whole social media thing. I mean, we got into this thing, and I pointed out to the Warwick police a couple of weeks ago that their notation on this woman who's alleged to have stolen $100 off the floor at a store, and they noted her in a Facebook post as Grandmother of the Year. I took the police chief on the radio for a real whipping. To his credit, he was like, A, I didn't see it, and B, I'm with you, and C, it's corrected. You're right. We shouldn't be opining on social media in that way because we should be behaving like we would in a courtroom, but there's no legal. I made an argument that it's just not right. It's poor behavior. There's a big distinction between poor behavior and that which is legal, illegal, or protected or unprotected, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and you always come down on the legal, illegal, protected, unprotected side.
Well, we do more than that.
That's the arena that you engage the discussion.
We do, but there are some times when something may be constitutional, but still is poor policy from a civil liberties perspective, and we'll call that out too. The mere fact that a government can do something constitutionally doesn't always necessarily mean that it's the right policy. In this case, though, what we're saying is.
You think this is unconstitutional?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, as complicated as we can make this conversation,
we can.
It's pretty simple. A town government can't impinge on somebody's ability to speak about things of public concern not connected to their immediate gig.
That's pretty much it. The courts make it a little more complicated than that, but at bottom, that's what it's about. Yes.
Yeah, it's a complicated world to navigate, yet there are still some simple concepts. The platforms may complicate and hyperbolize the emotion, but the language and the rights remain the same.
Yes.
Got it. Yeah, well, I'd like to see what's going on with the people of East Greenwich and the town in terms of this whole notion. ACLU's thoughts on a couple other contemporary issues when we come back. Stay with us.
To defend Americans, to protect their safety, their families, their communities, and their right to the American dream. Because Americans are dreamers too.
Does ACLU have a position on the DACA controversy?
Yeah, the ACLU has been supporting the DACA recipients in a variety of contexts. We've been lobbying for passage of legislation by Congress to restore the protections they had until President Trump rescinded Obama's executive order on it. The ACLU has been involved in some ongoing litigation surrounding the legality of the president's rescission of the order. So yeah, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in Rhode Island to try to deal with it. It's a very big issue. You have, about 1,500 or so people here in Rhode Island who fit in that category, and so many others across the country. And it's just terrible what they've been put through this last year.
But
one day
it requires a political solution, though. And while I understand the sentiment of President Obama, he didn't fix it. He put a Band-Aid on it. And now you've got an all-out political war that I think inevitably will come down on the doctors' protection side, whether it happens by March 5th or by the election or right after, it seems to me.
Well, it may very well. I don't know. But if you talk to one of these DACA recipients, I mean, every day they're waking up not knowing what their status is, whether they might be deported to a country they really don't even know. We're talking about people who may have come here when they were 2 years old, 3 years old. And the uncertainty, I can't believe the pressure they must feel in just having no idea what's going to happen to them in the next day.
Yeah, well, I think the human side of that reflects, and what you've articulated reflects almost every poll, 80+% American sentiment in their direction. Yet, I would suggest to you that the Democrats, and again, this is politics, maybe not legal constitutional arguments, but the politics of closing down government and getting involved in shutdown conversations over this issue will poison that well. I'm not so sure that that's the tack that ought to be taken. Leverage is an interesting concept, but I think the American people are empathetic, but not aggressively empathetic for a population that they still view as small. So it's a crapshoot down there. The deal that they got to make with Donald Trump, no doubt. We only have a minute. Can you explain, I know earlier today you had a press conference on net neutrality with Representative Regenberg, who's running for lieutenant governor. There's no way we're going to break it down here. But since you're on it, can you in a minute actually explain what the issue is?
Sure.
Talk about an unwitting public that's completely confused.
Yep. So what I do is I give the example of a telephone company. And the idea is that the internet, people who provide internet services should be treated the same as the telephone company. What the repeal of net neutrality means is they don't have to be treated like the phone company, which means, I say, think of a phone company that was able to decide whether or not to connect you to somebody based on what you wanted to tell the person. Imagine you had a phone company that decided whether it would take 50 rings to reach somebody or 2 rings to reach them based on who they were, or whether they were paying money to let you be able to reach them in 2 rings. That's what the repeal of net neutrality essentially allows for the internet in terms of gaining access to websites. It gives the big telecom companies the ability to say, we're going to block you from getting to certain sites, we're going to slow down how you can get to certain sites.
They say, we'll never do that.
They say we'll never do that, but they vigorously fought to have this net neutrality idea repealed.
See, it's important to go backwards to explain concepts before you go forwards. We all get the phone call. That's a good analogy. I'm going to borrow that. We'll have more shows on that coming up in the near future. Appreciate your visit. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Final word. We got an interesting show tomorrow. We got a new little marketing campaign, which is not a new marketing campaign. Next. Okay, so we're fun-sized, sort of. You'll learn about that tomorrow. And oh, by the way, I got to grab this. How about this one? Saw that on a car today, borrowed it from the nice lady. She goes, oh, I got plenty more in my trunk. It's heating up. See you tomorrow.